The country of Namibia is where we continued our African adventures. The town of Swakopmund on the coast has noticeable German heritage. We met our nomad adventure tour group here and were introduced to our bus truck, which would take us on our 2-week safari across the country. Much of Namibia is dry, with desert landscapes that are rich in minerals, especially uranium. We were headed into the rocky hills surrounding Spitzkop. These massive granite boulders retain significant artwork of the San people, also called Bushmen, who lived here centuries ago. Our guide took us to a rock wall to point out the paintings. Some are human figures, some are animals, and some are not clearly either one. Many of the figures are hard to differentiate, and some overlap one another. Our guide demonstrated his local language sounds.
Sometimes you can also use all 4 clicks in one sentence. If I say, let's go to the dance, then I can use all 4 clicks.
Our hike continued along the boulder-strewn desert paths with timely information about the plants we saw, while desert inhabitants listened in too. Then our driver explained what termite mounds are all about. The Nomad truck was set up in a shady patch for lunch. We helped ourselves to hot dogs and green salads, then all pitched in on a cleanup before we got underway. We looked but saw no desert elephants. We did stop at a roadside market to look at the locally crafted products. Many were hand-sewn items made by these ladies who wore very unusual tribal hats. The lodges we stayed at proved to be quite comfortable. In the evening, we were entertained by a local cultural group. The men played drums, and the women sang the songs. The children danced. It was all very energetic and cheerful. Proceeding the next day through the dry lands, we made a noon stop at our hotel, which had dramatic panoramic views of this scenic area. Not that the Wi-Fi addicts noticed. After lunch, we walked a short distance to a representative village of the semi-nomadic Himba tribal people. Women and children greeted us. The men were all away on a work contract. Himba women are known for their particular dress, especially their distinctive hairstyles. The hair is braided, then coated in thick, oily red powdered ochre. The hairdresser was open that day, making braids and adding extensions prior to adding the red paste. There were about 20 thatched mud houses in the village, made from small tree trunks plastered over with mud and dung. Inside, the huts are pretty bare, with just some skins and the family's belongings. The people live directly on the floor on their mats or skins. Gourds and baskets have given way to plastic containers these days. The women make small things like carvings and necklaces to sell to the tourists. We were grateful for the opportunity to visit these Himba people. Atocha is the premier national park of Namibia. Right away, we were sighting the park's animals. Giraffes, always a favor. Then at a waterhole, we saw our first oryx with their unusual long horns. The waterhole was a community of animals. A wildebeest came down, then a whole herd of zebra who had quite a few babies with them. Amazing to find giraffe and ostrich sharing the plains with more wildebeest and the lovely springbok antelopes. These males are not fighting, but zebras were definitely having a go at each other. By midday, things had slowed down. The black-backed jackal lay down for a rest, as did the spotted hyena. With rain on the horizon, we returned to the main park center and checked into our chalet for a rest. After dinner, we went to the camp's water hole to watch the elephants arriving and fill up on water. A very early morning game drive, a male lion stretching from his own early wake-up call, just like house cats do. Looks like his lovely ladies prefer to sleep in today. Many birds reside in Atocha Park, the big blue crane, and an Egyptian goose. Here's a secretary bird looking for breakfast. How lucky we were to sight a cheetah slowly walking along and joining two others in the shade of a small tree. The salt flats, or pan area of the park, was one of the few places we were allowed to get out and stretch, or play ball, or try to get unusual photos of yourself, the earth, the sky, and the horizon. On our way again with a black rhino crossing the road. They have a different head and horns and posture than this white rhino we saw in the same area. We had our first sighting of a red hartebeest. The stately giraffes are barely able to lower their mouths to the grass, while the warthog just goes down on its knees to nibble. That night we bunked comfortably at an old mining guest house, complete with 3-course candlelight dinner. This was a far cry from the Bushman village we visited the next day. We joined a group of Bushmen walking out into their dry surroundings. A young woman introduced herself and through an interpreter explained a bit how they use the plants and trees to support their lives in this harsh environment. Bushmen also trap small animals. Our group showed us how they build a fire using special sticks and lots of patience. Dry grass catches the first sparks and soon flames appear. The burning grass goes nicely into a pipe. It had been an intriguing afternoon with these Bushmen people. An early dinner plus a bit of a read, as there was no electricity in this camp. No matter, the Bushmen would use the burning firelight. Women did the chanting, their words telling stories that the men would evoke in dancing. Everyone gathered round to participate. We were up really early for a sunrise departure. A long way to go, as we had a flight to catch. Yes, we were now in the country of Botswana, and we were on our way to the Okavango Delta, a stunning contrast to the harsh desert environment we had been visiting. Here the waters of the Okavango River fan out into the Kalahari Basin, providing a watery habitat for its wildlife. There to meet us was our guide, Salvation. He took us by boat to the Mopiri Tented Game Lodge, where the staff presented us with song. Tents are not the right word for these canvas buildings that provide first-class comfort and amenities way out in the middle of nowhere. After a fine lunch, we joined Salvation to motor through a maze of waterways. Bird life was everywhere, like cattle egrets. And here's a pied kingfisher. The little egret on its long legs, a long-toed lapwing, and the malachite kingfisher. Yes, we saw hippos, shyly seeking to hide from us. Late afternoon, and Salvation parked our boat for us to enjoy the sundowner drinks while the sun provided an absolutely gorgeous sunset. Morning weather was fine again. We gathered in the main lounge for breakfast before joining Salvation for another waterway safari. By now we could identify the cattle egret, the pied kingfisher, and our favorite, the malachite kingfisher. Here's a weaver's bird's nest, a swallow-tailed bee-eater, a darter drying its wings, and the African fish eagle. We were headed for a bush camp to transfer to the mokoro, a local type of canoe. Poling through the shallow waters, we learned about the different types of water lilies, a day lily and an evening lily. We marveled at the Africa jacana bird's ability to walk on the lily pads. Once on the island, Sal led us on a game hike, but all we saw was a family of warthogs in the distance and a few birds, like a green pigeon. This is the really weird sausage tree. You wouldn't want to get hit on the head with this kind of sausage. Meanwhile, the Med had set up camp for a picnic lunch. The food had come with us on the boat from Mopiri. It was quiche, salads, and a sweetbread. On our return boat ride, Salvation showed us how to make water lily necklaces. How sad to leave the Mopiri Lodge and the Delta area. The return flight brought us back to Mound City and our crew and truck, who were waiting. Onward. The accommodations on this nomad adventure tour were quite delightful and better than we expected. After lunch, we went on an afternoon game drive along the Thebe River in Chobe National Park. The male impala were still resting, but not so the family of baboons, with Mom doing her best to corral a youngster. Oh my, elephants! Elephants coming right up to our safari truck. Elephants up close and personal. We seemed to be in the way of them wanting to cross over the road. This Cape buffalo was content, though, to wait its turn to cross over and join the others. By this time, we had transferred to an excursion boat to see more of the river animals. The crocodile must be waiting for something to come near enough to snatch. The hippos were out on little islands, feeding on the grass marsh and providing great photo ops for all of us. Photo ops, you say? Hey, how about me? Well, enough of that. Elephants are fun to watch, especially when they are around water. Here's a group coming down to tank up with water. And once they finish that, it's time to play. Sunset and time to head back to our lodge. The last day of our tour was spent at Victoria Falls. The Zambezi River drops over a wide expanse of cliffs and creates the falls between Zimbabwe and Zambia, providing the largest curtain of falling water in the world. The locals call it Moosiotuni, which means smoke that thunders. Today, this misty smoke partially obscured the dramatic cascade of the main falls, but the thunder was definitely there. The Victoria Falls Bridge is a jumping-off destination, literally, for the bungee jumpers, that is. We chose to take a helicopter ride over the falls. Sir David Livingstone discovered the falls in 1855, and he named them after his queen, Victoria. Seeing the panoramic majesty of this great expanse of falling water was thrilling. Our high viewpoint allowed us to see the snaking channels of the Zambezi River as it neared the cliff edge to make the falls. Now our traveling had come to an end. The variety of our experiences were terrific, and we will always think back to our time in Namibia and Botswana with pleasure.